So, there I was, on my very first day as a Galactic Cultural Exchange Program intern, standing in a room that smelled like wet mushrooms and fear, while a 4-foot-tall furry alien wrapped his tail around a support beam and trembled so hard his whiskers were vibrating. This was not in the orientation packet. "Miss Sutton," Professor Morthek said, his 4 golden eyes blinking in sequence like a faulty traffic light. "Please, remain calm." I was calm. I was extremely calm. I was the calmest person in this room, which wasn't saying much because the other occupant, a spongy-looking fungal alien named Kirix, had been releasing clouds of yellow spore dust from her neck gills for the past 10 minutes straight. The air looked like someone had thrown a highlighter into a blender. "I am calm," I said. Morthek flinched so hard his ears flattened against his skull. "It's vocalizing." "She," I corrected politely. "I'm a she, and I'm not vocalizing, I'm talking. There's a diff." "Document that," Morthek whispered to Kirix. "The specimen has preferences about linguistic identification, possible territorial behavior." Kirix's 6 tiny eye dots glowed brighter as she fumbled with her holopad, releasing a fresh puff of yellow that made me sneeze. Both aliens leaped backward. Morthek's tail tightened around the beam hard enough to dent the metal. "Apologies," I said, wiping my nose with my sleeve. "Spore allergy, maybe?" "Is that—" It expelled air violently from its face. That was a sneeze. "Document the sneeze." Morthek's whiskers were fully drooped now, giving him the appearance of a very concerned walrus. "Possible expulsion of toxic particles. Maintain 6-unit distance minimum." I looked down at my orientation folder, the one my supervisor had handed me exactly 43 minutes ago, with nothing but the words, "Lecture Hall, 7 Gamma, 0900 hours. Represent humanity well," scribbled on a sticky note. I was beginning to suspect there had been a miscommunication. "Professor," I said, trying my absolute best to sound professional and non-threatening, "I think there might be some confusion. I was told I'd be giving a cultural presentation about human customs." Morthek and Kirix exchanged a look. It was the kind of look 2 people share when the bomb they're diffusing starts ticking faster. "Yes," Morthek said slowly, his tail beginning to unwrap from the beam with obvious reluctance. "The presentation. You will be presented." "I'll be presenting." "You will be presented to the students." "Yes." Something about his phrasing made my stomach do an uncomfortable flip, but I was 22 years old, fresh out of university, drowning in student debt, and desperately committed to not screwing up my first real job. If the fuzzy alien professor wanted to use weird grammar, that was a cultural difference I could respect. "Great," I said, smoothing down my uniform jacket. It was 2 sizes too big, the shoulders sagging somewhere around my biceps. The quartermaster had taken one look at me, turned pale grey, and thrown the first uniform he could find in my general direction without making eye contact. Should I prepare any remarks? Or, "No remarks will be necessary." Morthek had started inching toward a hovering trolley I'd been trying very hard not to look at. On it sat a collection of items that looked disturbingly like restraints, and a muzzle, and something that was absolutely, definitely, 100% a leash. "Professor, what is all that?" "Standard safety equipment." His voice had gone high-pitched. "Purely precautionary." "For what?" "For you." I stared at him. He stared at me with 4 eyes, which meant he had a significant advantage in the staring department. Kirix released a small puff of orange spores. I was starting to suspect orange was not a happy color. "I'm not wearing a muzzle," I said. Both aliens flinched. Morthek's fur began to rise along his spine, individual hairs standing at attention like tiny soldiers. "The specimen is refusing safety protocols," he breathed to Kirix. "Note the aggressive boundary setting. Classic apex predator behavior. I'm not a specimen. I'm an intern. And I'm not aggressive. I took a breath, remembered my orientation training about remaining calm during cultural misunderstandings, and forced a polite smile. "I'm just clarifying expectations." The smile was a mistake. Kirix made a sound like air escaping a balloon, and her entire body deflated by approximately 2 inches. Morthek's fur completed its transformation. He now looked like a silver-grey dandelion with 4 terrified eyes. His tail shot back to the support beam so fast it actually whistled through the air. "Teeth," he announced. "The human is displaying teeth. It's a smile. Humans smile when we're being friendly. You expose your bone weapons when you're being friendly?" I closed my mouth. The door behind me slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing an elderly version of Morthek's species, same 4 golden eyes, same silver fur, though this one's was streaked with white, and his ears drooped with age. He wore elaborate robes covered in academic insignia, and carried himself with the weary dignity of someone who had seen too many faculty meetings. "Ah," he said, not quite looking at me. "The human specimen has arrived. Excellent, excellent." He was already backing toward the exit. "Professor Morthek, I trust you have everything under control for this historic demonstration." "Dean Vrothaans," Morthek's voice cracked. "Perhaps you would like to observe the, unfortunately, urgent business. Very urgent. Elsewhere." The dean's tail was curling so tightly it had formed a perfect spiral. "Do carry on. Represent the academy well. Mind the containment fields." His eyes finally flickered to me, then away so fast I might have imagined it. And, try not to provoke it. He was gone before I could respond. "It," I said flatly. "He called me it." "The dean is very traditional," Kirix offered, speaking for the first time. Her voice was soft, slightly muffled, accompanied by a small puff of pink spores from her gill slits. The pink seemed embarrassed somehow. "He means no disrespect. He's simply never been within 50 units of a human before. Has anyone here met a human before?" The silence was answer enough. "Okay." I tucked my orientation folder under my arm and straightened my too large jacket with as much dignity as I could muster. "Okay, that's fine. I'm a cultural exchange intern. This is literally what I'm here for, exchanging culture, building bridges, fostering interspecies understanding." I nodded firmly. "Let's go do a presentation." Morthek looked at the muzzle, then at me, then at the muzzle again. "Without the muzzle," I added. He made a small whimpering sound but didn't argue. The walk from the anteroom to Lecture Hall 7 Gamma was approximately 200 feet. It took us 15 minutes, because Morthek kept stopping to verify containment field status at every doorway, and Kirix kept pausing to document my hunting stride on her holopad. I was walking normally. I even made an effort to walk softly. "Note the deliberate quieting of footsteps," Kirix murmured, releasing yellow spores. "Classic stalking behavior. Predatory approach pattern documented." A security guard stood at the lecture hall entrance, a hulking reptilian alien with iridescent green scales and a plasma rifle that probably cost more than my entire education. She took one look at me, gripped her weapon tighter, and shifted 6 inches to the left. "Thank you for holding the door," I said as we passed. She shifted another 6 inches. The lecture hall was enormous. 200 hovering obsidian desks, arranged in a steep amphitheater, each occupied by an alien student in academy robes. The lighting was deep purple, giving everything an ominous ambiance that felt deeply unnecessary. Holographic displays along the walls flashed warnings. I tried not to read too carefully, though I definitely caught the words Class Omega Specimen before Morthek shuffled me toward a central platform. The platform was raised black stone, ringed with amber warning lights like I was about to be launched into space. Holographic projectors displayed anatomical diagrams that looked vaguely human-shaped, but with way too many teeth and what appeared to be retractable claws. A podium stood at the center, clearly designed for someone Morthek's height. My waist barely reached its top. 200 pairs of alien eyes watched me ascend the platform. Some had 2 eyes, some had 4. One student in the back appeared to have 16, arranged in rows like a spider. I waved. The spider-eyed student immediately crawled under their desk. "Welcome, cadets," Professor Morthek announced, his voice amplified by the hall's acoustics as he positioned himself safely behind a shimmering barrier I hadn't noticed before. Today marks a historic moment in apex predator studies. For the first time in this Academy's 3,000-year history, we have acquired a live human specimen for educational demonstration. I blinked. I'm sorry, acquired? Note the confusion display, Kirix whispered into her holopad, orange spores billowing. Possibly calculating escape routes. Our first exercise, Morthek continued, his tail now wrapped around his own leg for comfort, will be human aggression response testing. Please ensure your containment shields are active and remain seated at all times. The amber lights around my platform began to pulse. Oh no. Professor, I said carefully, when you said I would be presented. Yes, you didn't mean I would be presenting. His 4 eyes blinked in that unsettling sequence again. Why would we allow an apex predator to control the presentation? From somewhere in the crowd, an insectoid janitor had been quietly cleaning the aisle steps. He looked up, saw me looking at him, dropped his equipment with a clatter, and scuttled away so fast he left skid marks on the polished floor. I was not a guest speaker, I was the specimen. I would like to state, for the record, that I handled the revelation with remarkable professionalism. I'm a, what now? Okay, perhaps not remarkable. But I didn't scream, which I think showed admirable restraint given that 200 aliens were staring at me like I was a live grenade someone had accidentally rolled into their classroom. The specimen is vocalizing again, Kirix noted, her holopad trembling in her spongy hands. A fresh cloud of orange spores billowed from her gill slits, mixing with the purple ambient lighting to create an unsettling brownish haze. Tone suggests confusion, possibly a hunting tactic to lure prey into false security. It's not a hunting tactic. I'm genuinely confused. I turned to Professor Morthek, who had positioned himself behind not one, but 2 shimmering barrier fields. His tail had wrapped around his own torso like a furry seatbelt. Professor, I was sent here by the Cultural Exchange Program. I have a folder. There's a sticky note and everything. Yes, we requisitioned you through proper channels. Morthek's whiskers twitched nervously. The paperwork took 6 months. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to acquire a live human specimen? The insurance alone nearly bankrupted the department. You requisitioned me. Like laboratory equipment. You are classified as Class Omega Xenofauna. He said it like this was supposed to be reassuring. Very prestigious. Only 3 other species share that classification. 2 of them are extinct because they ate their researchers. A student in the 3rd row raised a tentacle. Professor, is it true that humans can survive the loss of multiple limbs? Excellent question, Miss Sutton. Would you care to demonstrate? I would not. Note the refusal, Kirix murmured. Specimen is protective of its limbs. Possible regeneration capability unconfirmed. I took a deep breath. I was an intern. This was my first day. My supervisor had told me to represent humanity well, and while I was fairly certain she hadn't meant while being treated as a dangerous zoo animal, I was also painfully aware that I had 6 months of student loan payments due and exactly 0 other job prospects. Fine. I could do this. I could be a good sport. I could demonstrate that humans were friendly, civilized, non-threatening members of the galactic community, and then I could go back to my tiny intern quarters and have a very long cry in the shower. Okay, I said, straightening my too large uniform jacket. What's first? Morthek blinked all 4 eyes in rapid succession. Apparently this was the alien equivalent of a double take. You're cooperating? I'm an intern, Professor. Cooperation is literally my entire job description. I clasped my hands in front of me and tried to project an aura of calm professionalism. What would you like to know about humans? The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear Kirix's spores settling on the floor with tiny pattering sounds, like extremely gross rain. It's a trap, someone whispered from the student section. Definitely a trap, someone else agreed. Perhaps it's attempting to establish dominance through unexpected compliance? Morthek's ears rotated in opposite directions, which I was starting to recognize as his confusion response. Very well. If the specimen is willing to participate, we shall proceed with aggression response testing. He gestured to Kirix, who scurried forward carrying a long pole with what appeared to be a very soft, very non-threatening foam ball attached to the end. What is that? A standardized aggression stimulus. Morthek had pressed himself so far back against his barriers that he was practically phasing through them. Kirix will administer a series of provocations while I document your response. Students, please note the specimen's eye movement, muscle tension, and any deployment of natural weapons. I don't have natural weapons. Noted. The specimen is attempting deception about its capabilities. He nodded sagely. Classic apex predator misdirection. Proceed, Kirix. Kirix approached me like someone approaching a sleeping dragon, slowly, carefully, with the kind of full-body trembling that suggested she was seriously reconsidering her career choices. Her 6 eye dots were glowing so bright they were almost white. The foam ball on the end of her pole wobbled pathetically. She poked me in the shoulder. Ow? Aggression response documented. Morthek's voice cracked. The specimen vocalized in reaction to stimulus. That wasn't aggression. That was surprise. You poked me. Poke it again, Kirix. Establish a pattern. Kirix poked me again. The foam ball squished harmlessly against my arm. It was, objectively, the least threatening thing that had ever happened to me, including the time my grandmother's cat had fallen asleep on my face. Could you please stop poking me? Both aliens froze. In the student section, someone whimpered. The spider-eyed student who had hidden under their desk earlier began quietly weeping, 16 eyes glistening with tears. It made a demand. Kirix breathed, her spores now cycling through orange, yellow, and a concerning shade of red I hadn't seen before. Professor, the specimen made a demand. Should I continue poking or discontinue poking immediately? Morthek's fur was fully extended again, transforming him into a silver puffball with 4 terrified eyes. We will move to the next examination. Threat display documentation. A holographic prompt appeared above my head, displaying the words specimen, display threat response in pulsing red letters. You want me to threaten you? We want you to display your natural intimidation behaviors. Morthek had produced a small device that looked like a camera. For educational purposes, perhaps you could show us your teeth again? Oh no, not the teeth thing again. Professor, I really don't think. Please, Miss Sutton. The students have studied human dentition extensively through second-hand reports, but none have witnessed actual human teeth in person. His whiskers were trembling with what I was horrified to realize might be academic excitement beneath the terror. It would be invaluable for their education. I looked out at the sea of alien faces. 200 students stared back at me, with expressions ranging from horrified fascination to outright pants-wetting fear. In the back row, a gelatinous alien had literally liquefied and was slowly oozing under their desk. I was going to be the reason an entire generation of aliens had nightmares about teeth. But I was also an intern, and my supervisor had said to represent humanity well, and maybe, just maybe, if I did this right, I could show them that human teeth weren't actually weapons of mass destruction. I smiled. It was my best smile, my customer service smile. The smile I'd perfected during 3 years of working retail to pay for textbooks. Friendly, warm, absolutely non-threatening. 14 students fainted. They just dropped, one after another, like dominoes made of various alien physiologies. The gelatinous one in the back splattered onto the floor in a puddle of unconscious goo. The spider-eyed student's 16 eyes rolled back simultaneously, which was somehow the most disturbing thing I'd ever witnessed. Magnificent, Morthek shouted, his voice an octave higher than before. Document everything, Kirix. The bone weapon display exceeded all projections. They're just teeth. I closed my mouth quickly, which somehow made things worse. Several conscious students screamed at the sight of my weapons being sheathed. Humans use them for eating, for chewing food. They're not weapons. Note, that the specimen claims its bone weapons are exclusively for consuming prey. Kirix was scribbling frantically, her spores now a solid wall of orange that made it difficult to see her face. This aligns with report 7451b regarding human predatory consumption habits. Professor, should we proceed to the dietary examination? Excellent idea. Morthek turned to address the remaining conscious students. As you know from your readings, humans are persistence predators who consume organic matter multiple times per solar cycle. Miss Sutton, how many times do you typically feed? I considered lying. I really did. But my mother had raised me to be honest, and I was still clinging to the desperate hope that transparency would somehow make this situation less insane. 3 times a day, sometimes 4 if I have snacks. The room erupted. Students who had remained calm through the teeth incident now scrambled over each other trying to reach the exits. Desks were overturned. Someone was screaming about caloric extinction events. The security guard I'd thanked earlier burst through the door, took one look at the chaos, and immediately burst back out. 4 times. Morthek's voice had achieved a pitch previously unknown to science. You consume prey 4 times in a single rotation. It's not prey, it's food, sandwiches, pasta. I had a granola bar this morning. What is a granola bar? Is it made of flesh? It's made of oats and honey. You consume the reproductive secretions of insects? I was losing them. I was losing this entire situation, and somewhere in the chaos, I spotted a small insectoid figure near the exit, the janitor from earlier, frozen in the act of fleeing, compound eyes locked on me with an expression of pure existential horror. I made the mistake of waving at him. A friendly wave. A sorry about all this wave. He dropped his cleaning equipment for the second time and ran directly into a wall. Then he got up and ran into a different wall. Then he found the door and was gone, leaving behind a mop and what I suspected might be a small puddle of fear-based bodily fluids. Predatory signaling, someone shrieked. The human used predatory signaling on the maintenance worker. I was just being polite. Professor Morthek. A shaky voice cut through the panic. One brave student, a tall avian alien with iridescent blue feathers that were currently puffed out to twice their normal volume, had remained in their seat. The texts mention that humans engage in something called bonding rituals to establish pack hierarchy. Could we observe a demonstration? Morthek, who had somehow ended up crouched behind his podium with only his ears visible, slowly raised his head. That is an excellent scholarly question. Miss Sutton, would you be willing to demonstrate a human bonding ritual? I should have said no. I should have absolutely said no. But I was exhausted and confused and still somehow committed to proving that humans weren't the apex nightmare predators everyone seemed to think we were. Sure, I said. What do you want to see? A handshake? A high five? Explain the handshake. It's simple. 2 people clasp hands briefly as a greeting. It's a sign of trust and friendship. I held up my hand demonstratively. See? Totally harmless. The specimen wishes to clasp appendages. Morthek's ears were rotating so fast they were practically helicoptering. With whom? Anyone. It's a greeting. Humans do it all the time. A heavy silence fell over the remaining conscious portion of the audience. Kirix had stopped releasing spores entirely. Her gill slits were clamped shut, and her entire body had gone rigid with what I could only describe as mushroom-based terror. I'll do it, Morthek announced suddenly. Kirix made a sound like a deflating accordion. Professor, the risk assessment clearly states, I have tenure, Kirix, and I have dedicated 200 years of my life to studying humanity. He stepped out from behind his barriers with the careful dignity of a very small, very fluffy alien walking toward what he clearly believed was his death. If I am to die in the pursuit of knowledge, so be it. You're not going to die. It's a handshake. Document everything, he instructed Kirix. If I do not survive, ensure my research is published posthumously. He approached the platform like a condemned man approaching the gallows, His tail had gone completely limp, apparently a sign of Vrothaan acceptance of fate. His 4 golden eyes met my 2 human ones with something approaching scholarly peace. He extended one trembling paw. I took it gently, careful not to squeeze, careful not to make any sudden movements, and shook it once, twice. A perfectly normal, perfectly friendly, completely non-lethal handshake. "There," I said, releasing his paw. "See, bonding ritual complete. Totally harmless." Morthek burst into tears. Not quiet, dignified tears, full body, heaving sobs that shook his entire fluffy frame. His tail wrapped around himself in what was clearly a self-soothing gesture. His ears had flattened so completely against his skull that they'd nearly disappeared. "Professor?" Kirix abandoned her documentation and rushed to his side. "Professor, are you injured? Did the human damage you?" "It touched me," Morthek wailed. "The apex predator touched me and I survived. 200 years of research and nothing prepared me for this. It was so warm, Kirix. Why are humans so warm?" "Mammals," I said weakly. "We're warm-blooded." "It's still explaining things," Morthek somehow sobbed harder. "Why is it still being helpful? This defies every behavioral model." I was beginning to feel genuinely bad for the little guy. He'd dedicated his entire career to studying humans as terrifying death machines. And here I was, ruining his worldview with handshakes and granola bar confessions. "Professor," I said gently, "I think there may have been some miscommunication about what humans are actually like. We're really not that scary. We're just people. We have jobs and hobbies and—" "Do you have a bonding ritual that does not involve physical contact?" the brave avian student interrupted. "The texts mention something called a hug." "Oh no," I shook my head firmly. "I am absolutely not demonstrating a hug. A handshake was already too much." "What is a hug?" It's when humans wrap their arms around each other as a sign of affection." The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the unconscious students breathing. "You wrap your limbs around other beings?" Kirix's spores had returned a violent, strobing orange that pulsed in time with what I assumed was her heartbeat. "Willingly. As a sign of care and friendship? Yes. That is a consumption preparation behavior." "It is not a consumption preparation behavior." "Then, demonstrate." I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the desperation to prove once and for all that humans were not, in fact, monsters. Maybe it was the fact that Morthek was still quietly crying, and I felt responsible. I stepped off the platform, walked over to Professor Morthek, and wrapped my arms around his small, fluffy, trembling body in the gentlest hug I could manage. Several things happened simultaneously. First, Morthek's fur stood so completely on end that he doubled in size, transforming from a 4-foot-tall alien professor into an 8-foot-wide ball of silver-grey terror fluff. Second, Kirix released such a massive cloud of orange spores that the entire front section of the lecture hall disappeared into what looked like a cheese-colored fog bank. Third, every remaining conscious student attempted to flee at once, creating a stampede that would later be described in official academy reports as the 7 Gamma incident. And fourth, the containment field, the one that had been surrounding my platform this entire time, finally activated. It activated around the wrong targets. Specifically, it activated around Morthek and Kirix, who were both within hugging distance of me when the automated threat response system decided that the real danger was them. "Oh no," I said, watching the shimmering barrier snap into place around the 2 terrified aliens. "Oh no, oh no, oh no. The human has trapped us." Kirix was releasing so many spores that she was essentially a walking smoke machine. "Professor, we're trapped with the weight." Her 6 eye dots blinked in sequence. "The human is outside the containment field." We all looked at the barrier. It hummed smugly, containing 1 very fluffy professor and 1 very spore-covered research assistant. I was standing on the outside, completely uncontained. "I can fix this," I said quickly. already moving toward the control panel I'd spotted near the podium. "I'm actually pretty good with machines. Just give me a second to figure out the human is approaching unfamiliar technology." Morthek had somehow become even more spherical with terror. "It's going to override the containment systems. We're doomed. My life's work, doomed. I'm trying to help you." That's what makes it worse. The control panel was surprisingly intuitive. 3 years of engineering electives were finally paying off. I found the emergency release, entered the override code that was helpfully labeled "Emergency Override Code" on a sticky note attached to the console, and deactivated the containment field. Morthek and Kirix tumbled out in a heap of fur and spores. I reached down to help them up. Both aliens screamed and scrambled backward so fast they hit the barrier generators, which sparked ominously and began making a sound that suggested expensive repairs in someone's future. "I'm just trying to help," I said plaintively. "Please. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm an intern. I have a folder. There's a sticky note." Morthek slowly, painfully, pulled himself to his feet. His fur was beginning to settle, though he still looked like he'd been through a wind tunnel designed by a sadist. His 4 golden eyes met mine, and for the first time all day, I saw something other than pure terror in them. It might have been respect. It might have been the beginning of a nervous breakdown. Hard to tell with alien facial expressions. "Miss Sutton," he said, his voice hoarse from screaming, "I believe I owe you an apology." "You think?" "And I believe I need to significantly revise my understanding of humanity." He paused, whiskers twitching. "Also, I may need to write a 48th book. What happened to the 47th? That was going to be surviving human contact, a statistical impossibility." He looked down at himself, still alive, still intact, merely traumatized. "I shall have to revise the thesis." Kirix had finally stopped releasing spores. She stood beside her professor, spongy body slowly re-inflating to its normal size, 6 eye dots dim with exhaustion. "Professor," she said quietly, "what should we title the incident report?" Morthek considered this for a long moment. Around us, students were slowly emerging from hiding spots, peering at me with expressions of confused wonder. The spider-eyed student had regained consciousness and was staring at me with all 16 eyes, though they remained safely under their desk. "Title it," Morthek said finally, "First Contact Protocols, a complete revision." He paused, then added, "Subtitle, They're somehow worse than we thought, but not in the way we expected." I decided to take that as a compliment. "So," I said, pulling out my orientation folder and flipping to a blank page, "can I get a copy of your syllabus? I should probably include this in my report." Morthek stared at me. Kirix stared at me. 200 alien students, in various states of consciousness and structural integrity, stared at me. "For your report," Morthek repeated slowly. "My supervisor said to represent humanity well." I shrugged. "I feel like this information would be valuable for future cultural exchanges. Maybe we could avoid the whole specimen misunderstanding next time?" The professor's ears slowly rose from their flattened position. His tail unwound from his body and hung naturally for the first time since I'd met him. His whiskers even perked up slightly. "Miss Sutton," he said, "I believe this may be the beginning of a very educational relationship." Behind us, the containment field sparked one final time and died completely. The lecture hall's lights flickered to emergency red, then stabilized. Somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to wail, probably related to the stampede that had evacuated half the building. And in the official Academy records, Introduction to Dangerous Species Studies, Lab Section 7 Gamma would later be graded Exceeds Expectations. I never did get a copy of that syllabus.